16 years after leaving Micah, Carter returns to Pinerove, a town gripped by a legacy of exclusion. He walks quietly through familiar streets that now feel like enemy territory. Unbeknownst to him, his twin brother Malik has also returned, each unaware of the other's arrival. The past they buried is waiting with open teeth. The road to Pinerove was darker than Micah remembered, even under the faded noon sun. The sky was gunmetal gray, a quiet press of clouds that seemed to hold their breath. His boots hit the pavement with a steady rhythm as he stepped off the southbound bus. No one greeted him, no fanfare, just the hollow hiss of hydraulics and the low growl of tires fading into the distance. He carried one duffel bag, olive drab, military issue frayed at the seams. His jacket was plain, his eyes were not. They scanned rooftops, alleyways, corners. Micah Carter had the gaze of a man who never fully left the war, because some wars don't end. They just change uniforms. The town hadn't grown in his absence. It had shrunk. The old oak by the station had lost a limb. The bus bench was gone, replaced by nothing. The welcome sign, once chipped in blue, now gleamed a sterile white with bold red lettering, Pinerove, a community of order. Micah read between the lines. He always had. Across the street, three men leaned on a black pickup truck. One wore a sun-bleached ball cap. Another rolled a toothpick between his lips. The third was broad-shouldered, with a tribal tattoo crawling out from under his collar. Their laughter cut off the moment Micah stepped into view. "You looking for someone, city boy?" the one with the cap called, lazy voice laced with challenge. Micah didn't answer. "You lost the toothpick," added. "Ain't many folks like you around here lately." Still, Micah walked on, straight-backed, even-footed. His heart rate didn't rise. His hands stayed loose. 6 years as a Navy SEAL had taught him to move like vapor, unseen, but always there. And though he carried no weapon visible to the eye, he carried memory. Sometimes that was more dangerous. The grocery store door chimed softly. Inside, cold fluorescent light buzzed overhead. Two white customers ahead of him exchanged familiar pleasantries, with the cashier talk of grandkids' gardens weather. When Micah approached, she rang his items in silent soap, a loaf of bread, and a paper map folded tight. She didn't look up. She didn't say thank you, just slid the receipt across the counter like it was infected. Outside, the black pickup idled near the curb. Micah didn't flinch. His eyes swept the area fire escape's utility poles, empty sidewalk corners, old habits activating one by one. He turned sharply and ducked into a side street. 2 miles across town, Malik Carter stepped out of a gray sedan with Texas plates and approached a clean glass storefront. Carter Advisory, Security Solutions. The lettering was new, so was the paint. He adjusted the collar of his navy button-up and opened the door. Inside was sparse: a desk, a chair, a wall waiting to be filled with maps and blueprints. He didn't know Micah was home. Micah didn't know Malik had come back. Their mother, Dorothy Carter, knew both and told neither. She stirred sweet corn chowder in a pot that hissed softly against the burner. Her hands were weathered but steady. Her eyes flicked to the edge of the curtains with each passing car. "He looks thinner," she muttered to herself, ladling soup into a bowl. "But still walks like his father, back straight, like truth." Micah had arrived that morning. She'd opened the door without question. Now, as the floor creaked beneath her feet, as the house whispered with silence, she sensed it, the storm returning. Not with wind, with men. Across town, Malik stood before two folders. One was full of property permits and building code violations. The other, older, more dangerous photographs of burned houses, broken windows, and red spray-painted slurs. All recent, all real. Businesses fined within days of black ownership. Homes bought cheap after months of harassment. A barber closed shop early when Malik walked past. His car had already been scratched. "Go back" scrawled deep into the driver's side door. He hadn't said a word about it, not yet. That night, both brothers sat in separate kitchens on opposite sides of the same town. They each spoke with Dorothy, hours apart, spoons tapping ceramic bowls. And in each call, her voice said the same thing twice. They call themselves the Elm now. Used to be the Greyhounds back in your father's day. Changed names like wolves change hiding spots. But the teeth stayed sharp. Malik had noticed the signs. So had Micah. Dorothy hung up with one and greeted the other with tired warmth. I didn't tell Malik you were home, she said. Didn't tell you he came back either. Figured if fate wanted you to cross paths, she'd manage. Micah blinked. Wait. Malik's here. She nodded, then moved to the hallway and pulled a key from around her neck. A drawer opened. From it, she withdrew a thick manila envelope marked in faded black pen, Thomas Carter. Father. These were his, she said softly. Property records, letters, maps. He started looking into it again before the accident. Micah opened the envelope and froze. Highlighted names, photos of damaged houses, bank statements with forged signatures. It wasn't just racism, it was theft. Systemic, strategic, and lethal. He wasn't the only one who saw it coming, she whispered, but he might have been the last who tried to stop it. A porch light flickered across town. A rusted wind chime trembled without wind. In one house, a man stared at photographs of land stolen. In another, a mother clutched the ghost of her husband's work now reborn in the hands of their sons. Micah stood and looked out the window. The past was no longer past. It had simply been hiding, waiting. Micah and Malik Carter have each returned to Pinerove for reasons they haven't yet fully voiced, both driven by the weight of their father's unfinished investigation into racial corruption and land theft. They move separately under radar, unaware they've been mistaken as the same man. But silence doesn't protect truth. Not here. The morning sky had turned brittle as if it might crack open if someone breathed too hard. Malik Carter sat in the corner booth of Bennett's Diner, same as he had for 5 days now. Always the same order, coffee black, no food, and always the same result, cold glances and an untouched cup. He wasn't there for the eggs. He was watching. The waitress, thin and tired-looking, held her tray like a shield. She never asked his name, never offered a refill. On day 3, she stopped making eye contact altogether. That was fine. He wasn't here for conversation. He was bait. At precisely 8:06 a.m., the trap set itself. We're closing early today, the waitress said. No apology, no explanation. Malik looked around. The neon sign still buzzed open in the window. 3 other customers, all white 2-in-county uniforms, were mid-bite. He smiled politely. My food hasn't even arrived. The kitchen's closed, she said, voice flat as linoleum. He slid a $5 bill beneath the coffee cup and stood slow and calm. No anger, no fear, just the kind of deliberate movement that made predators uneasy. He walked out the door. The bell above it jingled once. Outside, the sun cut hard shadows across the sidewalk. A dark blue pickup idled under a sycamore tree. Malik stepped toward his car, noting how the 2 men inside shifted, leaning forward, watching. You really don't get how this town works, came a voice behind him. He turned. 3 men blocked the sidewalk. The tallest wore a sheriff's deputy jacket over a gray hoodie. Not official, but unmistakable. Another was thick through the chest, gripping a worn baseball bat. The youngest one had a smirk like someone who'd never lost a fight or never remembered one. Gentlemen, Malik said evenly. You, Carter, the tall one asked. Heard you've been poking around properties. I run a consulting firm. Security assessments. The broad one stepped closer. Round here, folks don't like strangers sniffing in places they shouldn't. The first swing was slow, clumsy, telegraphed. Malik let it glance, his shoulders staggered slightly. His body stayed loose. When the bat lifted again, time stretched thin. He moved. A sharp twist of the wrist. The bat clattered to pavement. A palm strike to the solar plexus dropped the heavy one like a bag of bricks. The young one lunged fast but stupid. Malik sidestepped and shoved him into the side of the truck. Metal groaned. 7 seconds. That's how long it took. Only the tall one stood now, jaw clenched, jacket trembling. "You were hoping I'd swing first," Malik said softly. "But see, I don't need to." The man flinched. "Tell whoever sent you," Malik added, turning away. "I'm not the one you should be worried about." Behind him, a phone was already out. Recording. By evening, the grainy footage hit social media. Altercation outside diner. No arrest made. The comments were split. He went looking for trouble. That brother moved like he's special forces. How come he didn't get arrested? Must have had a record. Look at the stance. What no one noticed, what no one asked, was why 3 men with weapons walked away without permanent injuries. Why the man at the center of it all hadn't said a word louder than necessary, or why half an hour later, in another part of town, the same man or someone who looked just like him would show up again. The community basketball court on East Pine was cracked and faded. The hoop hung crooked. The backboard was tagged with sun-bleached graffiti. Micah stood calmly at the edge, watching 2 officers corner a teenage boy. Marcus Johnson, 15, skinny with a busted bike and panic in his eyes. "You vouching for him?" one cop asked. "I've been coaching him the last 2 hours," Micah said, smooth as old jazz. He tossed a ball to Marcus. "Go warm up. No charges, no resistance. Just a man who didn't flinch." By nightfall, local forums were buzzing. Is there a black vigilante in Pinerove? The ghost, Dashir one-man army, Huich Hamonei. But the surveillance department at the sheriff's office saw something else. Deputy Chief Riker Voss froze the diner video on frame 78. A still of Malik fluid, disciplined, dangerous. "This ain't some street brawler," he muttered. "That's trained movement. Precision." Sheriff Candler stood behind him, jaw tight. "Military, possibly Navy. SEALs move like that." Voss pulled a file. Facial match came back. Gas station cam flagged him as Micah Carter. Former Navy recon. Record sealed. "Same guy as the community center?" the sheriff asked. "Same face," Voss said, frowning. "But 2 different places. Same day. Different clothes. Timestamps 30 minutes apart. You think there's 2, maybe twins? Or maybe someone playing a very smart game?" The sheriff's face darkened. "He's a Carter." That name meant something in Pinerove. Back in his office, Malik stood before a wall, plastered with maps and strings. He traced lines from bank transactions to shell companies to old property deeds. It all pointed back to one man, Malcolm Greaves. Across town, Micah sat with Marcus's mother, Dr. Adrian Johnson, a local dentist. Her new clinic had its windows shattered twice in 1 week. "They won't stop," she said softly. "They don't have to," Micah replied. "They already own the police." "Then why help us?" Micah looked at her son. "Because someone helped me once. I remember what it felt like to be cornered." His phone buzzed. An image message. A diner still frame. Malik, but not him. Wrong shirt, wrong street, same face. His breath caught. "Malik," he whispered. Miles away, Malik received the same image. Captioned, "He's you, or he's trying to be. Watch your back." Malik didn't smile, but his eyes did. "I was wondering when they'd notice." That night, in separate rooms with old ceilings and aging wallpaper, 2 brothers stared at the same photograph and realized something that made all the difference. They still think there's only one of us. Micah and Malik Carter, long separated but bound by blood and buried truth, are finally aware they both returned to Pinerove. Mistaken as one man, they've used that to their advantage. But when each receives a threatening envelope showing the other bound and bruised, they realize the enemy has begun its move, and it's personal. The photograph arrived in silence. Micah found it under the door of his rented motel room, the envelope thick with dread. He slid it open with practiced fingers. Inside a grainy image of Malik tied to a chair, his head slumped, a dark bruise curling along his jaw. Below it, a note in block letters. Cooperate or she dies. Courthouse basement. Come alone. Across town, Malik opened his own envelope. It showed Micah in the same chair. Same bruise, same words. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. At the same hour in two separate rooms, they reached the same conclusion. This wasn't about them anymore. It was about her. Dorothy. Micah moved fast, his hands remembering the motions of war. A flashbang packed into a coat pocket. A military knife strapped to his thigh. His body calm, but something inside him cracked open, raw and aching. He hadn't felt fear like this since Afghanistan, and this was worse. Because this time, it was home. The house on Willow Bend was quiet when he arrived. Too quiet. The porch light was still on. One of her slippers lay sideways by the threshold. The door wasn't locked. He moved through the house like a ghost, clearing corners, listening for anything that didn't sound like memory. The coffee pot was still warm, the mug on the counter half full. A photo frame lay face down on the floor, the three of them from a summer long gone. Smiling, whole. His grip tightened around the frame until the glass cracked. Malik stood under the dim glow of a courthouse light. The door to the basement was already ajar. He took a slow breath and stepped inside. Two men waited just past the stairs. They weren't local law. Their posture was too tight, their gear too clean. Private contractors, military trained. He dropped the first with a silent chokehold, smooth and precise. The second turned too late and met a jab to the throat. He collapsed with a wet gasp. Red emergency lights flickered through the hallway like a warning pulse. Upstairs, Micah slithered through an air vent, bypassing three sensors using copper wire and a flattened soda tab. He landed in a clerk's office. On the wall, a grainy surveillance feed showed Malik alive clearing rooms. Not tied up, not bleeding. The photo had been a lie, a trap. Micah's jaw clenched. They met in the courthouse archive room, two doors, two angles, one heartbeat. Each burst in with weapon raised. And stopped, Micah said. Malik said. They didn't lower their weapons right away, but their eyes told the truth. They think we're one, Malik said. Micah nodded. And now they'll learn the difference. In a blink, they were moving, covering each other's blind spots, using hand signals, honed in boyhood woods and war-zone fields. They swept the corridors like memory incarnate. Each corner turned was a step toward the past. Dorothy, Malik asked, breath shallow. Taken. Same time as us, Micah replied. We split. You go east. I'll take the main corridor. Try not to blow anything up yet. Malik smirked. They vanished into the dark. Malik found her first. Dorothy sat in a converted office, arms zip-tied, a streak of blood dried at her temple. But she was upright, fierce, still her. About time, she muttered. He knelt to cut her bonds. Still know how to aim a shotgun. She smiled, blood in her teeth. Better than your uncle ever did. Micah found the others, Sheriff Elroy Candler, Deputy Riker Voss, and Malcolm Greaves in a makeshift control room, glowing with laptop light and surveillance feeds. The moment he kicked the door open, time seemed to freeze. Three powerful men, one mistake. They had only prepared for one, Carter. Micah stood in the doorway. Malik stepped in behind him. And between them, Dorothy, steady on her feet, shotgun, braced against her hip like it was 1963 again. Greaves stammered. There's two of you, Micah raised his sidearm. You weren't ready for one. And now, Malik said, eyes fixed, you've got both. Dorothy stepped forward. Her fingers brushed Micah's wrist as she handed him the shotgun. Don't let them finish what they started with your father, she said. Then she turned and walked out unshaken. Sheriff Candler went for his weapon first, too slow. Micah fired high. The shot cracked the air and shattered a window above Candler's head. That was mercy, he growled. Voss ducked and returned fire, the bullet grazing Malik's temple before sparking against a file cabinet. Malik rolled, right then surged forward, disabling Voss with a single knee to the chest. "You thought you were dealing with a myth," Malik snarled. "Something you could erase?" Micah disarmed Candler with a twist, slamming him into the wall. "Your badge doesn't buy you silence anymore," he said. "We recorded everything. Only Greaves remained." Malik approached slowly. "You remember Thomas Carter?" Greaves trembled. "You didn't pull the trigger, but you signed every order. You called the contractors. You falsified the reports. You stole his land and killed his voice." "I didn't," Greaves stammered. "I didn't order, but you benefited," Micah snapped. Before Greaves could answer, a flashbang rolled into the room. Instinct took over. Malik shoved Dorothy behind cover. Micah shielded the exit. The blast erupted in thunder and white fire. Metal screamed. The world spun. When the dust settled, Malik was gone. Micah blinked through the ringing. Blood, papers, smoke. Somewhere in the compound, Malik had been taken. Again. After rescuing their grandmother and confronting the corrupt men behind their father's death, Micah and Malik Carter are separated by a sudden tactical ambush. Malik is captured and interrogated, while Micah escapes with the evidence. With the enemy believing it has won, the brothers prepare their final move, not in secret, but in full view of the town that once tried to erase them. Rain clung to the streets of Pinerove like breath on glass. Every gutter overflowed. Each step Micah took outside Pastor Irene's home sent small ripples through puddles that hadn't yet drained. He held his grandmother in his arms, light unconscious, her blood pressure barely stable. Inside, Irene had set up a cot-warmed broth and laid a Bible next to a medical bag. "She'll be safe here," Irene said softly. "But you need to go now." Micah handed her the shotgun. "He left us a trail," he murmured, reaching into his pocket. A rusted dog tag, its letters nearly worn away. On the back, 3 numbers carved by hand, 147C. Dorothy, barely awake, whispered from the cot. "Not a date, a storage unit. Your father's." Micah's eyes flared. The old train yard. He was already moving. The storm howled behind him, but the fire in his blood was older than weather. Some inherit land. Others inherit wars. At 6:57 a.m., the next morning under a low slate-gray sky, a high school junior named Reggie stood across from the courthouse with a prepaid phone Micah had given him. His hands trembled. His voice cracked. But he pressed live and held his breath. 5 black vans cut through the police barricade like scalpels through tissue. Behind them, the thud of heavy boots, the flash of raincoats, the low murmur of federal agents coordinating in clipped tones. Inside, Sheriff Elroy Candler's voice shrieked orders that no one followed. His badge no longer held weight. His voice no longer carried fear. The mask had slipped, and the system beneath it had begun to crumble. Micah Carter walked in through the side corridor, soaked from the storm, a hard drive in hand. His boots tracked mud across marble. At his side, FBI Deputy Commander Lyle, Thomas face-drawn briefcase handcuffed to his wrist. Inside that drive, financial ledgers, property transfer scams, surveillance logs, and the audio, the damning audio of Deputy Voss boasting about how Thomas Carter should have stayed dead the first time. In the hallway, Malcolm Greaves sat with his hands folded until he saw Micah. Then the folding stopped. "You don't understand," Greaves began. "I understand more than you ever wanted me to," Micah said. Greaves cracked. "I was protecting investments." "Then you can explain that," Micah said to a courtroom full of the families you buried in red tape. Outside, Dorothy stood between Pastor Irene and Dr. Adrian Johnson. Her cane grounded her. Her presence silenced the press. When a reporter asked if she had anything to say to the men being let out in cuffs, she looked directly into the lens. "Tell them my sons are done whispering." An hour later, Malik Carter stepped out of the rear federal van, bruised, stitched, but upright. He nodded once to the agent beside him and walked toward the courthouse steps. Micah waited. They stood in silence for a long moment, the storm lifting behind them like a curtain. They didn't embrace. They didn't speak. Their silence wasn't for absence, it was for memory. Finally, Micah extended a hand. Malik took it. Ready, Micah asked. Malik gave the smallest of smiles. Let's rebuild what they tried to erase. 3 months later, the old Pinerove Community Center bore a new name, etched in bronze letters, Carter House of Equity. Where once hung portraits of segregationist judges, now stood a plaque. This building is protected by the people who refuse to be forgotten. Inside the hall had been renovated using seized funds from the Graves estate. Office spaces now offered free legal aid. Small business grants had been established for displaced families. Veterans and youth received free security training. It was called the Thomas Carter Initiative. Dorothy visited once a week, always on a Sunday. She never entered through the front. She preferred the side door where the wind still hummed the way it did in 1996. Pastor Irene walked the grounds with a clipboard and a tired but grateful smile. Marcus Johnson now served as a youth liaison, his hands calloused from work, his voice steady when he taught other boys how to move with purpose, not fear. Malik ran logistics. Micah taught situational awareness seminars. They didn't call themselves heroes. They called themselves ready. Behind glass near the front entrance hung a photograph taken on the day of the courthouse reckoning. Two black men, identical in structure, different in scar, stood side by side as Malcolm Greaves was loaded into a federal cruiser. They didn't smile. They didn't wave. They simply stood, unmoving, unapologetic, unforgettable, because the reckoning had never been meant to be quiet, and neither were they.